Assalamu alaikum everyone. Very excited to welcome all of you to our book club. It's been many years in the making, something I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I always thought if I start a book club, I have to start it with the following music. Now here at the Saad Omar book club, we have a very expansive music and production budget, so I'm going to ask my music director to cue the dramatic music. Thank you. That's enough. Yeah, that's enough. Thank you guys for indulging me. That was just something I had to do. I've always wanted to do it. I had a friend, Fawaz Siddiqui from Florida. Shout out to Fawaz. He said that he was speaking at an ISNA convention, and he always said that the first time he spoke at an ISNA convention, he would do the robot. So he actually started his speech with a robot, and there was a stunned audience. I'm sure many of you were surprised we just started with that. But that's one of my favorite songs. It's a classic bit symphony, even though I don't listen to symphony and I don't really drink tea, but I thought it would look good on the camera. So anyways, with that said, this book club, as I mentioned, is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. The idea of it came about a few years ago. I was speaking to a group of youth at a Minna camp in DC, and the question came about, and I think this is a very common question, that when we go to our these conventions and conferences and seminars, there isn't a lot of follow-up, right? So our dean, we kind of register and we interact with our dean on a special events basis, and then we come back and we wonder, where do we go from there? One of our teachers, Dr. Kamran Riaz, who's also a scholar, he once said that we keep doing pep rallies, but we're not playing the football game afterwards. We keep building momentum, and then the momentum dies. And I always felt like a book club would be a really great way for us to interact with our dean and to grow on a sustainable way, and not just, we have peaks when we go to an event and we fall off. But specifically, the idea of this book club came about growing up. There were a lot of luminaries that I learned about, the Ghazalis and the Ibn Sinas and others. And when you look at the golden age of our history, you see that we were a people that we were able to bring harmony to philosophy and literature and history and algebra and all these different sciences. As Muslims, we were able to find the common ground and have them interact with one another. I think that was one of the brilliant aspects of our civilization. In the last 20 years in America, arguably the most important Muslim visionary and luminary has been Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. And whether we agree with every detail of his teaching or not, it is almost indisputable that the work he has done for dawah has been unmatched. And growing up, I remember when I was about 13 or 14 years old, I had the opportunity to hear Sheikh Hamza for the first time. And up to that point, I had been attending, Islamic schools and Sunday schools where Islam was always a category of study. So you would go to an Islamic school, but one class would be Islamic studies. So right there, it's a clear, indication that the rest of the sciences that we're studying, or the rest of the classes, are non-Islamic studies. So we had segmented Islam as a distinct thing. What Sheikh Hamza did for us, and for many of us, was that and Sheikh Hamza's speeches were not just a lecture, they were an experience. When you heard Sheikh Hamza's lectures, and you can still obviously access them today, you would get a lesson in psychology, you would get a lesson in history, you would get a lesson in philosophy. You would have Socrates on one hand, Shakespeare on another hand, Imam Ghazali on one hand, Ibn Taymiyyah on another hand, and all of that you'd be learning within the context of the Seerah, the Hadith, and the Quran. And that was so groundbreaking, because when you heard a Sheikh Hamza lecture, and then you went to college a few years later, it's almost like he gave you the bookshelf, and everything you learned afterwards, you knew where it went. So if you had a class in linguistics, Sheikh Hamza had given you the paradigm for understanding that principle within the larger intellectual framework. And I think that is so valuable in a time where our American education system is in big trouble. And if you ever saw the movie Good Will Hunting, Matt Damon's character says that, everything you learned at Harvard, you could have learned with a $3 late fee at a local library, right? Where our schools have become expensive book clubs or expensive, library memberships, and they're not even giving us the right books. I did a degree in English, and I did it at a good university or whatever, a seemingly good university. You could get an English literature degree from Georgetown University and not have read Shakespeare. You could have read gender in Shakespeare, but not Shakespeare itself. You can go to Princeton or Harvard and get a degree in biology and be really, really good in talking about biology. But if someone talked to you about world politics or someone talked to you about anthropology, you literally have no idea what they're talking about. And this is not the culture we come from. Even if you go back to the founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, these geniuses were able to bring in Greek philosophy. They were able to bring in Muslim spirituality. We know of Jefferson's connection to Islam. Benjamin Franklin was, by the age of 15, he was a master in many sciences. And the way they were able to function in the 1700s were our ideas of literacy. They say now in the last 40 years, or actually last 50 years, Americans have lost 40% of their vocabulary. So if you hear a John F. Kennedy speech, the words he's using in the 1960s, we have access to about 40% less words than they did themselves, right? So we are living in a time where literacy is dwindling. Interestingly, the time we're living in, literacy is dwindling while information is increasing. In the age of Wikipedia, we have access to more facts and information bits than ever before. When we look at the media, we have sound bites after sound bites, but people know less. Conversations are becoming more and more shallow. And a lot of that is because we have abandoned the book. This is the first year where more people have bought books through e-readers, Kindles, or whatever, than they have through physical copies of books. So this book club, we're looking to really reverse a lot of these trends. I want to start off by introducing the book of this month. This is Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. Many of you have probably heard of it. Some of you have read it. And I hope for those who have read it, reading a book the second time, you really get to know it a lot more. This book was written in 1923. Khalil Gibran was a Lebanese Christian poet. He is considered the third most read poet of all time now, even though he was, in the last century. So it hasn't been that long since he was around. The Prophet is his greatest, is kind of seen as his masterpiece. It was in the 1920s when it came out, it was a huge success. In the 1950s and 60s, it had renewed interest. In the counterculture movement of the 1960s, it became one of the main books that were kind of circulated. Everyone from Gandhi to Martin Luther King to Malcolm X to the Beatles, Johnny Cash, everyone kind of went through this book. You'll see it once you start reading the book, you'll start seeing quotes that you've seen in pop culture, you've seen in presidential debates. So this book is really, really influential. The other great thing about it is the way it's structured. It's written, there's a character called Al-Mustafa, and he's considered a fictional character of the Prophet. So, obviously Khalil Gibran had a lot of exposure to Islam, and there's some influences of that in his writing. And Al-Mustafa, this prophetic character, is answering questions from people of his village. So one person's asking him about love, one person's asking him about marriage, one person's asking him about working, one person's asking him about joy and sorrow. And he writes these very short poems as a response to the people who are asking him. And what I love about this book is, even though it's extremely profound, the poetry itself is extremely accessible. And I think that's a lot of poetry. Some of the poetry we're going to do later in the year is a lot more complex. I think this is a good starting point. So what we're going to do is, if you go on the website and you click on weekly resources, you'll see the page numbers for this first week. And we want everyone to get through page 1 through 14. Now, for most of the books that we're going to do, I think the other 9 books that we're doing throughout the year, we want you to get the physical copies, because I do believe that we need to get back to reading books, like holding books and feeling books and opening a book. I think it's really important. For this first book, I thought I would keep it very accessible, because we don't have time maybe to order the book in advance, that you can just go ahead and read it online. Also, a lot of the books have pictures that are not, maybe not necessarily appropriate for this book club. He drew his own abstract pictures that go with the book. But so for this book, we want everyone to get to page 14, and you can see that in weekly resources. And once you do the reading, please keep in mind that there's 2 ways I want you guys to interact with the club. If you go on to forums, which is also everything under weekly resources, it gives you a list of everything we want you to do in a week. You can click on gems in the forums, and that's where you can share like a favorite passage or a favorite line, something that really strikes you as you're reading the book. It's a way for you to kind of remember that, to record it into your own memory, but also to share it with the community. And then what we'll ask you to do is, when you write the quote, put the page number and also try to reflect upon it. One of our teachers said that when we're looking at text, we should move away from just shallow surface level interpretation and try to go into some deep sea diving. Same thing we do inshallah when we read the Quran, that we're trying to get beyond just reading the Quran from just a one-dimensional approach, and we really want to have a multi-dimensional understanding of the Quran. So with these books, we really want, when you put the gem down, interpret it, give your personal reflections, allow yourself to enter into the book and to interact with it at a very personal level. The second way to interact with the forum is I'm going to be posting a challenge every week. And what I'll do is I'll take a section. I've already posted the first challenge for the first 14 pages. It's a very kind of a difficult or abstract line of poetry. And this one specifically deals with Khalil Gibran's notion of a dream within a dream. So if you've seen Inception, it's kind of I think Inception was somewhat inspired by that. But really interpret it, try to figure out what it means. And when other people post, feel free to reply to them. That conversation is what's going to keep the club dynamic. So that's one thing we want everyone to do every week, is to interact with the forum. The second thing we want you to do is, obviously this video is on our YouTube channel. We're going to have a very large group of guests, scholars and artists and poets and all types of different thinkers are going to be posting video blogs. So please watch each other's video blogs. We have, I'm probably the least qualified, and it's not even an exaggeration, person that's going to be blogging on that video blog. We have teachers like Ustad Hisham Mahmood from Harvard. We have Sister Faryal Salem, who's a University of Chicago PhD. We have Ray Lassina, who's going to be one of our main people. He's a tenured professor of English literature. So it's going to be really, really dynamic. It's going to be a lot of fun. I have a few of my musician friends. I'm going to ask them to do performances that connect to the poems. People like Dawood Wormsby, inshallah, and others. So this is going to be a really dynamic place for us to interact with each other's thoughts. And what I want to mention to all of you is, if any of you are interested, let's say you read something and you really have something you want to share, and it's more than just like a one-line forum entry, you can record a 2 to 3 minute video blog. Please don't keep it more than 3 minutes long. And then you can email it to me. My contact information is on the website. And if you email me the video, like an MP4 file, I'll post it onto the YouTube channel after kind of editing it and taking a look at it. And then, of course, that'll be a way for you to contribute. So the first way to contribute is through the forums. Second way is through the video blog. And I wanted to mention also, if you see over here, I have a few of my old books. I have a collection of these antique kind of Victorian books from the 1700s and the 1800s. Every month, the person who gives kind of the most insightful reflection of the month, I'm going to be sending them a book from my collection. And all of these books will be really, really old books of poetry, and many of these are collectible items, but this is something I wanted to do to kind of share my collection with all of you, because I really do feel like this book club could become like an intellectual and philosophical community that we can all really learn from each other and share from each other. So those are the main ways that we want you to interact with the book club. The last thing I want to mention regarding the book club is that even though we're meeting online and we're going to be talking online, I do believe that technology is not the only way we should be interacting. And many times we're a little too dependent on technology. So I would encourage that, there's places like DC, Detroit, Lexington, where we already have 10, 15 people in one city that have joined the book club. To try to network with people in your area, to have physical meetings, I think that would be great. Also, I'm going to be, if you look at the community link on the website, we're going to be having some of the guest artists and thinkers and myself. We're going to be traveling and doing what we call like the tea parties in different cities. So if you're interested in inviting us, we'll have in-person weekends where we go through more, insights and reflections. We may share other books that we're interested in. So please do check that out on the communities page. We're also going to have the annual book club reunion every year in New York City, which I'm really excited about. And lastly, if you go on the weekly resources on the very, very bottom, you see a bonus enrichment section. So what we're going to do there is, and if anyone has any ideas and links that they want to share, please do email me. Every week I'm going to be finding, videos that may, even if they're like interpreting a media thing, like a commercial or like a TED Talk or a song or a film analysis. And that's going to be a really dynamic section where we actually have 3 or 4 people that are helping me with that to give us additional resources that kind of extend off the book. So like, let's say Khalil Gibran talks about the notion of sorrow, right? We may put a spoken word piece on sorrow. So these are all enrichment things that you can interact with throughout the week. And the last thing I want to say, I think one of the challenges of our time and one of the challenges of the generation that we're part of, which is there's a lot of good in our generation, there are a lot of challenges. One of the biggest challenges are that we have very much a shortened attention spans, that we join projects and then we get out of them. we're like non-committal. We're just intrinsically non-committal, and we're not ready to do something as a habit. And as believers, the wisdom of having 5 prayers in a day is that we build habits. And it doesn't mean that it becomes ritual without meaning, but habits allow us to grow. It allows us to consistently progress. And if you join this book club and you read the first few pages and you never come back, inshallah, you still benefited. But this book club is really not for that type of person. This book club is for someone that's going to be committed to all 10 books a year. And the reason I'm saying that is I had a friend that I challenged a few years ago with this, and I think I mentioned this before to some people, but I asked him, he was at a youth camp. He says, where do I go from here? I want to progress. And I asked him to read an hour a day. And after, I think, 2 or 3 years, he came back to me and he told me that just by reading an hour a day, he had read 150 books. And in our tradition, we understand that if you haven't read, and I've even heard Malcolm Gladwell and other people talk about this, if you haven't read 400 to 500 books, you don't know anything about anything, right? And literacy comes from consistent reading. So right now, the commitment is about only 10 hours a day, right? 10 hours a day. Some people got scared. 10 minutes a day, right? But over time, I hope that naturally you guys will start reading more and more, and we'll get to the point where we're finishing a book a week. And it may take 10 years to get there, but we want to get to that level of literacy. So that's all I want to say today. Thank you so much for joining. Please, if you are benefiting from the club, definitely reach out to friends, invite them along. We want everyone aboard, but most importantly, let's interact weekly. Let's talk. You have my email, you have my phone number. We're all very kind of easy to get in contact with. If you have ideas, if you have ways of improving the club, this is your club. We're just helping to facilitate it, and we're honored to have you. Thank you so much.